To start working on the blade, I cut a piece off the bar. The first step after cutting the piece off was to start forging the tip. To start forging the tip of the Santoku, I needed a hammer nearly horizontal with the piece.
The tip is close enough at this point, so now I'm going to work on the handle.
Because of how thin Santokus are, I needed to be absolutely sure the blade was perfectly straight. I've got it forged. So, I have this blade template. It was my first attempt at this Santoku. And I'm going to trace it out onto the piece I just forged. After tracing out the shape of the blade, I moved on to the grinder for profiling. To start work on the bevels, I marked the center of the blade with a drill bit its same thickness and a Sharpie. So, the blade has been completely rough ground. It's still extremely thick. However, the problem with my previous attempt is that it was way too thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to research AEB-L make sure I have the right information about how to heat treat it, and then I'm going to go do that. There we go. To start off the heat treating, I normalized the blade by heating it to the austenizing temperature of AEB-L and allowed it to air cool. As he stared into the forge, he thought long and hard, as sweat dripped from his brow. Are not people like the blades I make, each unique? I made more adjustments to the forge in order to get the proper temperature for the quench. I used an ammo can of Parks 50 I had to quench the blade. After allowing the blade to soak in the heat for a few minutes, I quenched it. Two hours later, and it's time to finish the rough grinding. Let's go. It's about 100 thousandths thick, all the way down the spine, completely flat. It will taper once I put in the bevels, based on how the blade geometry is. So, I'm just going to do that now. Now I'm using this plattern with a fairly large radius on it, and I'm going to use that to put in an S-grind. What is an S-grind, you may ask? I'm glad you asked. An S-grind is a means of grinding a kitchen knife so that food doesn't stick to it while it's being used. Here's what it looks like. Currently, this blade has a geometry structured just like a triangle. If you cut food, it'll come up and stick to this side. However, with an S-grind, a hollow is ground inside of it. So when you cut food, air is allowed to get underneath it, and it can just fall off. With that in mind, I need to pay careful attention that I don't grind straight through the knife. So I'll be doing a bit of layout before I hop onto the grinder, just to make sure that no mistakes are made. While grinding the hollow, I paid careful attention to where the belt was touching the blade. While grinding, I would tilt my hands ever so slightly to change where the hollow ended up. After finishing with the S-grind, I ran over the bevels and spine once more, and convexed the edge using the slack of the belt. With the grinding finished, it was time for hand sanding. I sanded for so long, my hands ached. I sanded for so long that my squirt bottle ran out of water. I sanded for so long, I changed my shirt. The blade fully completed, I moved on to the handle, first laying out where I would drill holes for pins. For the handle, I chose this resin material, because water doesn't affect it, and it looks nice. With the scales successfully fit up, I needed to pay some attention to the tops of the scales. Before gluing it up, I did more hand sanding. It needed it because it got a little scraped up while I was drilling the holes. To help the epoxy bond better to the tang of the knife and to the scales, I ground notches into them. Seeing as the handle wasn't too comfortable right now, I planned to fix that. I probably should have left my respirator on for that. Anyway, the blade is getting really close to done. All I have left to do is just sand the handle, buff it, and then sharpen it. And that's it. Then it's time for the testing. So, let's get right into it. I am so happy with how this knife came together. The blade, the edge, the handle, how it cuts. Ah. Anyway, this was a custom order by a guy who went to my website and sent me a message, and we talked over the details, the stainless blade, the S-grind, all that type of stuff. So if you and your knife want to be the subject of my next video, go to my website linked in the description below, or any of my socials and send me a message and we'll talk about it. Until next time, thanks for watching.